start with the South Windsor Forum for Treasurer and Attorney General. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Charlie and the Glastonbury Democratic Town Committee for coordinating this evening. We have several candidates, and it's really hard to get each candidate before the town committee and to get a feeling of where they stand and where their positions are, and that for them as a person, as a candidate. So we welcome you here this evening. If to start with, if you'll stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. To my left here this evening is Charlie Murray, the chairman of the Glastonbury Democratic Council. And to my right, Tony Poirier, the chairman of the South Windsor Democratic Council. This evening we're going to start with our treasurer candidates, and like when we had our gubernatorial forum, we will have a 3-minute intro, followed by a couple of rounds of questions. That will end, and then we will go to Attorney General for the same 3-minute intro and a few rounds of questions as well. The candidates have before them questions that have been submitted by Democratic Town Committee members and others in the community that they will take and choose from and answer as they go. So, as we start this evening, we'll start with Treasurer and Brunin. Welcome.
Hey guys, it's great to be here in Glastonbury. And you know, I lived not far from here when I first got married. My wife is from here, so it always feels like home to be in this area. Thanks for having me here. I'm running for treasurer. I'm an attorney in Hartford. I work with financial firms. I'm a husband and a father, and I've got 4 kids between the ages of 2 and 4. And you know, I'm running for treasurer first and foremost to help build a stronger state for my kids, for all of our kids to grow up in, to come back to and call home, build careers in, build families in. And I think it's going to take each of us working together to do that. I've never run for political office before, but this is a critical time in our state. I think we all know that. And as I get around the state, I sense that people are hungry for vision, for leadership that looks to the future. And so I'm running for treasurer because I think each of us need to use our gifts, use our skills to help come up with solutions to build a better state. I think our next treasurer has to be first and foremost someone whom we trust to manage our pension funds, to safeguard the pension funds of 212,000 hardworking men and women all across our state. Teachers, social workers, nurses, these are their livelihoods, and that's a responsibility that I take seriously. It also has to be somebody who's going to work with our governor's office, work with our legislature to deal with our ballooning pension obligations and come up with solutions. Number 2, our treasurer needs to be somebody who has a vision for economic development in the role. Now, I think our treasurer should serve as our state's chief economic officer, to be an advocate for our state's businesses, to build bridges between our business community and state government, and I'd like to be a part of that. And number 3, I think our treasurer needs to be someone who invests with values. When you invest $34 billion in the economy, you get a voice and a vote in what the largest corporations all across America look like. And our next treasurer needs to continue the work of our current treasurer in using that voice, using that vote, to push for greater social and environmental responsibility, diversity on boards, on issues of CEO pay and pay equity. That's a leadership role that Connecticut needs to maintain. Now, I feel incredibly fortunate to be in this position. My parents came to this country as refugees when I was a small baby. And they sacrificed and worked hard to give me and my sister a life that they didn't have. But they also believe deeply in the value of having a community to invest in, investing in your communities. And that's what I've tried to do my whole life. That's what I've tried to do in my neighborhood in the south end of Hartford. That's what I'm trying to do today and in this journey, to invest in the future of our state. Because I think if we can work together and roll up our sleeves and invest in our future, we can build a better state, one that innovates, one that our kids are proud to move back to and call home, one whose best days are ahead of us. And so I'm asking you to join me in that journey, to get involved, be a part of this conversation, be a part of our team. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to taking questions.
John Blankley.
Thank you, everybody. The first thing you'll notice from the way I speak is that I'm immigrant. I come from England. My father was English, my mother was Scottish. We were naturalized in the late 90s. That was one of the proudest moments of my life, as a matter of fact. We've been in America for 35 years, and I can tell you that I'm 50% English, 50% Scottish, and 100% American. Let me just tell you about my father, first of all. You probably know, if you've seen my bio, that I have a big corporate background, I have a small business background, and I've been involved in politics in Greenwich, where I'm from. But I want to tell you about my family, first of all. My father was a coal miner. I got to Oxford University from a coal mining district in the north of England. That's like a coal miner's son from West Virginia going to Harvard. It doesn't happen. It happened very rarely in England. I was the first boy from my school where that happened. It is the hardest, dirtiest, nastiest, most dangerous job there is, and that was the job that my father had as a coal miner his whole life. And I tell you this because what happened in November of 2016 was very personal for me. The number of mines inspectors has decreased. The powers that mines inspectors have been curtailed. This is just one of the many bad things that have been done over the past year, but I mentioned that one in particular because I feel it quite personally. So let me talk about the financial background. I came here as Chief Financial Officer of BP North America. It's known as the British Petroleum Company, but it is actually an American company. So I was CFO of half the business. Decided not to go back to England. We really wanted to stay in America, and I've been Chief Financial Officer of other major Fortune 500 companies. 18 years ago, I started my own business. Created dozens of jobs in the state of Connecticut, and I'm very proud of that. 10 years ago, I joined the RTM. I just spent 2 terms on the finance board in Greenwich, one of which was looking after the investments in our pension funds in Greenwich. Let me talk about the 3 main areas that the state treasurer has to do and why my background is perfectly suited for this job. Treasury operations. I have managed treasury operations much larger than the state of Connecticut. I have done big bond issuance, not as an advisor, not as an attorney, but as the man who had his neck on the line. The man who said, this is the strategy we ought to pursue, these are the bonds we ought to pursue. I was the one who negotiated the covenants, I was the one who was out there in the capital markets negotiating with the rating agencies. And when it comes to investment, I have spent my entire life investing, handling endowment funds, handling and managing pension funds. This has been my job in big corporate and my job in Greenwich, in the town where I come from. So that is my background. I believe there is no other candidate who has this particular set of skills and experience. I said I'm a small businessman. That means I buy and sell. So I'm selling this evening. I'm selling you on my expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Markell.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you, Charlie, as always, for organizing this forum. So I'm Dita Fargama, and this is the first announcement I'm actually making because just this past weekend I was exploring for statewide office and was exploring for governor, but this past weekend I decided that I was going to enter into the treasurer's race after really thinking about where my expertise lies, what is sort of ailing Connecticut and how I can best help out. It just made a lot of sense for me to really
put myself forward for the treasurer's role. So this is a little unorthodox because I literally found out about this forum about an hour ago. And so put some notes together. I actually had a forum or an event in Glastonbury, so printed out my notes there. So, but thank you for inviting me, and thank you for letting me be here today, because I haven't formally made the announcement. So I am running for treasurer because I, first of all, believe in Connecticut and its future, first and foremost. My husband and I moved to Connecticut when we were deciding to start a family, and we knew that there was no better place to raise our two kids who were both born here. These are testing times for Connecticut. The Republicans are looking at Connecticut as a flippable state, and with Donald Trump in the White House, this is possibly the worst time in political history for our progressive blue state to turn red. So I'm a different type of Democrat, really because of my upbringing, because of my 20 years of financial sector experience, and really my pro-business, progressive vision. My mom is a single parent of 3, and she really struggled to provide my sisters and I with basic necessities, but she's a strong woman. And every day of our lives told us 3 things. 1, to educate ourselves, to always strive to reach our full potential, and to never forget where we came from. Sorry, are we on a time limit? I made this mistake last. How much time did you say I have?
For 3, and do it for 3, and then.
Oh, okay, all right. So I'm going to stick to sort of why I'm running for treasurer. I spent a lot of my years, so my mom really told us 3 things, which is to educate ourselves and strive to reach for our full potential, and I carried her words throughout my life, always broke barriers. I studied electrical and computer engineering in a class of over 100. I was one of few women, and then I went on, I actually started my career as a bank teller at the age of 15, and went on to work in the financial sector for the next 20 years, a very cutthroat and male-dominated industry. But a challenge is something that I've never been shy of, and right now I know Connecticut is facing some real challenges, both fiscally and economically, and so I want to use my expertise and use my passion for progressive policies in the best way possible. There is a lot going on in Connecticut right now, not just with our ability to match our pension liabilities to our assets, but there's a whole new element because of Donald Trump's tax plan when he is adding trillions of dollars of debt at a deficit at a time when we are at full throttle in the economy, and that is unorthodox. So I'm very nervous that we are going to be moving away from a low inflation environment to highly inflationary, and so our assets that are already having trouble matching liabilities will specifically have more pressure. And so through that role, we need a steward who can replace Denise Nappier, who decided last month not to seek re-election, to make sure that we are managing those assets prudently, that we are finding ways to match our liabilities, and that we are finding ways to combat Trump policies that are coming down that are putting extra pressure on our finances. So I will look forward to speaking questions. I think I'm being ushered off now. I'll take questions and speak more about some of my ideas, but I hope to gain your support. I'm very passionate about Connecticut. I do think that I'm uniquely qualified with my 20 years of financial sector experience and passion for change. And I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you so much.
Based upon where we are, Varun, if you want to take 5 minutes and handle the questions that are there, and each one of the 2 of you, each one of you handle the 5 questions that we have for treasurer, we can make it all the way through.
Sure. Do we go down the list of all the questions? 5 minutes. The first question is what would your biggest priority be as treasurer? And the last question, I'll be efficient with this, is how does the state deal with building pension obligations? For me, that's the same question. I think the biggest challenge our next treasurer is going to have is working with our legislature, working with our governor's office to deal with our balloon pension obligations. Our pension obligations could quadruple in the next few years. And between now and 2032, projections just continues to rise each year. And we've seen what happens. I mean, our legislatures continue to budget in 2-year cycles, and each year there's a little less and a little less because our liabilities kind of add up. And so our treasurer has to, I think, take an active role in working with our legislature to restructure specifically our teacher pension obligations. It's essential to the security of our teacher retirement fund. And teachers have a very near and dear place in my heart. My mom is a teacher. My wife has worked as a teacher. These are people who every single day take money out of every single year take money out of their own pockets to pay for school supplies, take time away from their own families to be with our kids. And we should be there for them as a state. And so I think we need to focus on restructuring our teacher pension obligations, and that's it's something that affects our financial security as a state. And I think the treasurer can have an active role in restructuring our obligations, and then in a way similar to the restructuring we've done of our state employee obligations in the last cycle. And so I'd like to talk more about that. I don't think I can in 5 minutes. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to run to something else after this. But if you have questions, I'll just say this now. You can email me, arunan@arunan4ct.com, ARUNAN@arunan4ct.com. And I'll give me a cell phone number. I'll give you a call. I'd be happy to chat about any of these things with you. Let me look at the other questions real quick. What role you see a treasurer playing in the broader economy? So I talked about this a little bit. Thank you. In my intro, I think our treasurer has a tremendous opportunity to serve as our state's chief economic officer, to use the private sector connections and the platform that come with the job, to be an advocate for our state's businesses, and I think that's a role that I would like to have, to look at the vote the treasurer gets on the bond commission and push for a long-term economic development strategy with that voice and with that vote. We as a state have thrown money away at corporations as ransom every time they threaten to leave our state. We spend more per capita on economic development than any state in the nation. And you look at what we've gotten. We begged these companies to stay in our state, but we haven't really invested in the infrastructure of the next 20 years, the next 50 years of good job creation, of innovation right here in Connecticut. And so I'd like to use that voice in the bond commission to push for a long-term economic development strategy. And then, and this is another idea I don't think I can fully get into in 5 minutes, but I think we need to look creatively at how we use our pension funds. And we've got to be conservative and maintain a strong rate of return because these are people's livelihoods, and I understand that. But I think that there are ways in which we can use our pension funds to invest directly in our state, to spend that money right here in Connecticut, instead of pushing it into New York and California. I think there are pieces of our fund we can invest right here in the state. And so, I'd like to use that role of treasurer to push for a vision and push for a voice for economic development in this state. I think I've got a couple minutes to finish the rest of it. What is something that Denise Napier has done well that you would like to continue? Denise Napier, again, I touched on this before, has been a leader when it comes to using the voice and vote that you get when you invest $34 billion to push corporations to be more socially and environmentally responsible, to address issues of CEO pay and rising CEO pay across America, to push for diversity on boards. And that's a voice, that's a vote that's really important to me. There's studies that have shown that more diverse boards in which companies and corporations in which CEO pay and the pay gap between the CEOs and the lowest paid employees are smaller, they actually gain better returns in the long run. So as a fiduciary, it's a responsible thing to do. For my core values, it's the right thing to do. And I think our treasurer should continue to maintain a national voice when it comes to each of those issues. And Denise has been one of the few treasurers in the country, along with the treasurer of New York State, New York City, and the CalPERS systems in California. She's been one of the few treasurers in the country that's really used that effectively to shape what corporate America looks like. And I'd like to use that voice. So I think I'm out of time now, but thank you.
First question, what would your priority be as state treasurer? So we have a $45 billion asset allocation that needs to be handled prudently. We want to make sure that we are competitive in posting a return, because again, we're hard pressed to meet liabilities, and we want to make sure that we're maximizing on that. The other thing that I think that I would like to look into is making sure that we are using innovative and 21st century technology to really manage the risk, because there are a lot of technologies out there now, risk management technologies, that can really help us, steward us into making sure that we are maximizing on those returns. And some of the other things that I would like to do is make sure that we are cost cutting in terms of some of the money management that we use, that the fee structures are competitive, to make sure, again, that we are getting the best return on those assets, because we have a lot of people, a lot of retirees who are counting on those returns on those assets when they retire, and are retirees that are currently counting on it now. What role do you see a treasurer playing in the broader economy? I think it's kind of endless. First of all, I think as a treasurer, I would work very closely with the governor and the legislature to make sure that we are focusing on our economy. The two things that I think Connecticut really needs to focus on is growing our economy and expanding our tax base, creating jobs, and bringing more revenue to the state to put less pressure on sort of that liabilities and assets issue that we have. So in terms of investing through the Treasurer's Office in some of our own innovative businesses, bringing businesses to the state, and diversifying our investment portfolio within Connecticut, I think is very, very important. So I certainly will be looking at ways to do that. And then also, like Aruna mentioned, corporate governance is very important. I started an organization that helps empower women to stay in the workforce through family-friendly policies like paid family leave and equal pay, which to me makes so much economic sense. To empower women and men and everybody to stay in the workforce is very, very important. And I think through that role, because you do have a say in companies and in how they're conducting themselves socially, I think there's a huge impact that a treasurer can make. And also when we bring industries to our state, to make sure that those companies are also exhibiting good corporate behavior, investing in the environment, investing in their employees, making sure that that pay gap is not 400 times, the CEO to the average worker. And so, Connecticut has been a very progressive state, and I think we can continue to do that. And I look forward to having the influence of making sure that we are exhibiting good corporate governance over these institutions. What has Denise Nappy done well? Financial literacy is huge to me. She started a program on financial literacy. Turns out Connecticut ranks in F in financial literacy. And for a state where we are having trouble managing our own finances, it's very important that we start educating our kids young. I was part of a program last year with the Urban League of Southern Connecticut. I've been on the board where I taught African American high school students about investing, about saving, about how they manage their loans when they go to school and afterwards. It's very, very important that we start educating our kids young, and so I will be a huge advocate for better financial literacy in our schools. What can we do to better invest our funds? I mentioned before, just better risk management, finding ways to cut fees from our money managers, and just being much more efficient about that. And of course, the treasurer's role will be to educate the legislature on how we are matching up with our obligations and our assets, and finding ways and working with the legislature and the governor to come to innovative ways to make sure that math is adding up once and for all, which it hasn't for the last 80 years. But I'm a mathematician, and that will be one of my first jobs would be to help that math add up so that we can be on a much more fiscally and economically sound path in the future. Thank you.